Okay, so we're going to get started on this webinar. Just before we get started, just a few notes. This is a live webinar. At the end, we'll take questions, and then if anyone has any questions related to this webinar or anything else, any other questions that you have, then please ask them. But let's get started. So this particular webinar is about why law firms do not like to hire attorneys from practice settings other than law firms. And this goes for people that are thinking about maybe leaving their current job in a law firm to go in-house, or even taking your first job in anything other than a judicial clerkship outside of working in a law firm. And it's very important that people realize just how essential it is if you're in a law firm to stay employed by a law firm if you want to remain in a law firm. Because law firms, I'll just be completely honest with you, they very rarely will want to hire people that are coming from in-house, coming from most government jobs, coming from academia, coming from other things. It's very rare. And I was even having a conversation last night with a recruiter that I've worked with for here, BCG, for over 20 years. And she was saying, yeah, once people go in-house, even the best attorneys, in Silicon Valley, when there's a real need for corporate attorneys, I mean, they very rarely are able to get jobs in law firms again. So if you do work in a law firm, stay working in a law firm, there's just so many benefits to it. But you have the ability to generate business. And once you generate business, you're basically running your own business, and you have the ability to do that for the rest of your career. I'm working with one attorney right now that is 75 and has a book of business of over $2.5 million, which isn't bad. I work with attorneys all the time that are practiced their entire lives pretty much inside of law firms, but this sort of thing is not something in sort of companies. Most people that go to work in companies, they're done usually by the time they're 60 or maybe a little bit later. People that go to work in the government, it's much the same thing. Going to a law firm actually does provide a lot more stability than most other practice settings. And once you learn the sort of skills you do at a law firm, you can always open your own law firm and do all sorts of things like that. So that's what this presentation is about today. I think it's an extremely important presentation because so many attorneys make the mistake of going into other practices and then never being able to get back into law firms. I'm going to talk about this today. It's really essential that people understand this because I've seen so many attorneys in the past, make this mistake with their careers. Law firms generally, if they're smart, won't hire attorneys coming from other practice settings. And I'll cover some of the exceptions. Almost always, if a law firm has the ability to choose between working inside of that or choose an attorney that's coming from a law firm and another practice setting, they're almost always not going to hire the attorney from another practice setting. And literally in 2 decades of doing this, I've very rarely seen the law firm do this, and they pretty much will avoid you if you're coming from another practice setting. I'll tell you the reasons why today. And a law firm is making, and goes for any type of person that they're hiring, but when a law firm is trying to decide who to hire, they're really asking 4 questions. And these are important questions. There's articles that I've written on BCG about these questions. You should write them down and think about them in terms of your own candidacy when you're trying to work in law firms or any type of employer. But they're really asking whether or not you can do the type of work that they have, which I'll talk a lot about today. They're also asking whether or not you can be managed. They're asking, will you do the job long term, which means if they hire you, are you going to commit to them? And law firms want people that are going to commit because once you start working in a law firm, you're going to be exposed to clients. It's a lot of work to hire you. People that are always looking for jobs are not a good hire. They want people that are going to stick around. They want their clients to feel like the same people are working on their matters. They're also asking if you really want to work there because law firms are hiring people that really want to work there. There's a 5th one too that I talk about a lot. It's not listed here. It's do we like you? But I'm not going to really talk about that today. These 4 questions for the standpoint of work, what a law firm's looking for when they're hiring you are the most important. And there's 2 types of categories attorneys. Of attorneys that are coming from different practice settings. There are those who previously worked in a law firm which means that you worked in a law firm and then you went into another practice setting. And then there are those that have never worked for a law firm. So I'm going to discuss each of those individually. The most common type of attorney looking for a position are attorneys that have worked in a law firm and then taken a position in another practice setting. And this means that when you are facing different choices in your career, so let's say you start your job inside of a law firm and then you think, wow, I should go in-house. I should take this job in-house. Or, wow, this is interesting. I have this opportunity to go work in the government, or I have whatever that is. And there's lots of practice settings that attorneys can work in. Attorneys can go to work for the government. They can work inside of a company. They can even do things like try to start their own business. They can work in academia. There's a million different things they can do. But if you've taken a job in another practice setting, the first thing is law firms are really going to assume that you probably can't do the job. And a lot of times they're going to believe that you may have gone to work in this other practice setting because maybe you had performance issues in the law firm, and the law firm's going to assume that maybe you left working in law firms because of that. And so if you left because of that, then they shouldn't hire you. And sometimes attorneys are looking for practice settings where their performance is judged less harshly. They may not have liked a law firm. And so in order to escape the criticism of their work, the hours, whatever, they try to find jobs inside of companies. And in general, positions inside of companies pay a lot less than what an attorney would be making inside of the law firm. A lot of law firms will view that as you have taken a step down if you've gone to work inside of a company as opposed to working in a law firm. So what about doing the job? So doing the job inside of a law firm, this is why law firms will often assume that you can't do the work that they have. Jobs outside of law firms will typically require that you work many less hours than you would have to work inside of a law firm. Law firms, typically, you have to go a lot of hours. That's because most practice areas, whether it's doing real estate transactions, corporate transactions, litigation, most practice areas inside of law firms will require you to work lots of hours. Now, that's not necessarily to say that you may not only need to work an average of 35 or 40 hours a week, but there are times when you may have to work very long hours, and a lot of people don't like that. And so they try to get out of law firms for that reason. And a lot of times, one of the main reasons we talk to attorneys that want to go in-house and do other things is that they want to do that because they want to get a lot more control over their time. And so they believe that they're going to work inside of a company, which is actually often true, a different practice setting. They may get to leave work from 5 to 5:30, get in their normal time. And that, in most law firms, is not how things work. It's often quite demanding, and you will have to, in most law firms, if things get very busy, you're expected to do the work. The corporate transaction that needs to be done can't slow down because you want to get off work earlier. Litigation case, you can't slow down. If you want to get off work early, you have to do the work. So a lot of people want to get much better control over their time. And I remember the first firm I worked at, I had given notice to the firm, and they were coming by and talking to me about not leaving. And I was told them that this attorney that I was acquaintance of mine, I said that it was sad that this attorney didn't make partner because I liked them a lot and they seemed like they were working hard, and that another attorney did. And then this guy said to me, he's like, it's sad, but you have to remember that the attorney made partner billed 3,200 hours last year, and the one who did not only billed 2,800. Just think about that. That's a lot of hours, 60 plus hours a week. If you're going to bill 30, almost every week of the year. So you definitely have to work a lot of hours in a lot of law firms. But you also have to be accountable for all your time. So you need to write down your time in 6-minute increments, and some are 10 minutes, whatever the firm. So you need to write down every hour you work on a matter. And then if you need to, which I've actually never had to do inside of a law firm, which is funny, but you need to be able to justify your time. So that's important when you're going to work inside of a law firm. Doing the job means working a lot of hours. And if you're coming from another law firm, there's a presumption that you're doing specific work that they may not presume if they're coming from another practice setting. Most companies don't. They're coming from a non-law firm practice setting. Most companies don't really have any idea of the caliber of legal work required of attorneys in those practice settings. You just don't know. But there were, for example, the caliber of work that's required from major law firms, as well as smaller to mid-sized firms, is often consistent. And it can be all over the board, not a law firm employer. And law firms have no idea what sort of work is required by their. Now, may sound a little convoluted in the sentence I just said. So I want to make sure that that you understand what I'm saying. So if you come from, say, a really good law firm, for example, would be Sidley and Austin, and you're doing litigation, and you apply for a litigation job at another law firm, say Proskauer, which is a good firm. So the Proskauer firm's going to know, if you're doing litigation, that the type of work and the caliber of work that's required for someone that's working several years at Sidley and Austin is good. They know that you're probably a good attorney. But if you're applying to Proskauer and you're working in the litigation department of Amazon, they're going to have no idea what's required. They don't know the type of work that Amazon's doing in their litigation department. They're not meeting them in court. It's much different. So the idea is that when you're coming from another law firm, a law firm can know if they know the law firm, they're going to know the caliber of work that's required. And if you're not coming from a law firm, then they're going to have no idea. And so they can't really judge your quality of work you're doing or your ability to do the job. Whereas if you're in another firm whose reputation you're familiar with, they can understand whether or not you can do the work. So law firms, makes perfect sense. If you're coming from a corporation, they don't know if you can do the work. First of all, they don't know if you can build the hours, but they also don't know the quality of your work. And again, if you're coming from a law firm and it's a peer type law firm, they're almost always going to know the type of work and the caliber of work that attorneys from there do. Whereas once you go in-house, it's just a crapshoot. They have no idea the type of work you do. And just as another aside that I just want to bring up to everyone, this is the reputation of attorneys that go in-house. Attorneys that go in-house become experts in referring complicated, non-road work out to attorneys and law firms. That's the reputation they get. So because of that reputation, most law firms, even though they are very nice to the attorneys that are doing that when they're giving them business, they don't respect attorneys coming from in-house. And so if you want to get work in a law firm, you're getting work from other attorneys, partners and things, you need to be able to do good work that's acceptable to them, whether or not whoever you're doing the work for. So if you're working for another partner and doing work for them, or you're working directly from a client, you need to do good work. Then the quality of work is generally going to determine how busy you are. The longer in a firm, there's a perception that you're doing a good job and people are giving you work. Whereas if you leave, there's a perception that you may have left because you didn't have work. So that's one of the main signs of an attorney often that's considered good is they have work and they're billing a lot of hours. And so if your work isn't well received in a law firm, what attorneys will often do is they will leave the law firm and join an in-house company where the work may be easier to come by or less harshly criticized. And that's the perception that people believe that a lot of times attorneys will go in-house or join a different practice setting because they weren't doing a good job in law firms. And it's interesting that you should look at these things. And someone was actually proposing to me to start a business doing this, which I certainly don't have time to do, but the idea of rating attorneys. So attorneys can really rate each other by a lot of things, rate each other by the quality of firm they're at. They rate each other by the law schools they went to and how well they do. They rate each other by their title inside of law firms. But the way law firm attorneys rate each other is if you go in-house, there's suddenly no way to rate because they don't know the quality of work of where you're working and you're not bringing in big clients. And that's another sign. You don't have the employment stability. So all these things are important and how you position yourself in your career. So it's important to position yourself if you want to work in a law firm as someone that can stay at law firms a long time, that can do better work at law firms, that can move up to better law firms, They can be more specialized, all these sorts of things. In terms of the ratings of law, how attorneys rate other attorneys, I don't know how interesting this is to everybody, but I do this all day. So I want you to understand how important these decisions are. For example, if you're laid off, almost irrespective of whatever, that's often taken as a negative ranking of your abilities, because law firms typically don't lay off everyone. They keep around the most productive and best attorneys. So the idea is if you're laid off, it's getting a C or something when everyone else is getting A's, because the best attorneys, the ones that are getting the most work inside of law firms, are typically the ones that are considered the best attorneys. And once you're laid off, that can create problems with that perception. I don't want you to think the world is ended if you're laid off, but if you get laid off in some major markets like New York City, where there's tons of attorneys that aren't laid off, it's going to be very difficult for you to get a job at another great firm. And the ones that do the best work in every law firm are in demand and they don't let them go. If they're building a lot of hours, they don't let them go. But it's the same thing if you leave a law firm for another practice setting, that it almost functions like a rating system. So your rating in terms of what working at a law firm suddenly goes down. So you may be at one of the best law firms in the country and a third or fourth year there. But if you go in-house and you maybe say you're ranked an A, but once you go in-house, your rating goes down to a B minus because you're just not considered. It might even go down to C plus because you're not really considered a law firm material anymore. And even if a law firm can get over the suspicion that your legal abilities and belief are in the practice setting are not part, it also, the other problems is that there's a perception of once you go into an in-house position that your legal skills are going to suffer. Like you're not going to be as good of an attorney because there's a lot of reasons why in most cases your legal skills will go down, because once you're when you're in a law firm, there's a lot of attention to detail that's required. Your work is going to suffer for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons that it will suffer is that, first of all, a lot of times you're doing overlooking your work. You're not looking for paying clients, that you have to do a good job of keep them on. Most times in-house attorneys will, if they see anything that looks sophisticated, that could be problematic, in order to cover their backs, they'll refer the work out. So most sophisticated work is not done by in-house attorneys, it's done by law firms. And that's very true. When you get in-house, when attorneys get in-house, it becomes very easy for them to, instead of having to do the most complex work, to farm the work out. And that's pretty much what happens, not all the time, but most of the time. And so your legal skills will often require. And then there's other things. When you're in a law firm, you're in a position where you also need to be able to develop your own business. And as you get more senior in a law firm, you're expected to develop business. And this is part of what it means to do the job in advance. So if you can't develop business as you get more senior, you cannot do the that the law firm has. So what does that mean? So if you decide to go in-house as a 10th year attorney, as a 5th year attorney, and then you want to go back to a law firm as a 10th year attorney, the law firm's you're not going to have any business. You're not going to have any potential business. You're not going to be in a position, or you're not going to have a skill that's been so refined inside of a law firm that it would be easy for you to go out and get business. So that's a problem. So if the law firm feels like you can't do the job or raise the business, they're not going to like that. And most of the time what happens is when an attorney gets more senior, they leave to go to another practice setting because they feel like that's the way to save their careers. And if you go in-house early, partners can go in-house a lot of times as general counsels and things. But if you go in-house as a senior attorney, you're basically sending, and I'm sorry to say this, I'm not trying to be, but you're sending the message that you don't have the network abilities, you're not getting work referred to you, you're not liked or respected enough, you don't have whatever the special sauce is to generate the work, which again, this is something everyone should be thinking about. And as an aside, if you're a young attorney, your ability to generate work is going to determine the course of your career. A lot of times, rather than working in the largest law firms, people will actually sometimes leave the largest law firms to go into firms or markets where they feel like they can generate business. When the attorneys that are able to generate business inside of law firms will do something like the following. They'll say, I'm going to build 2,000 hours a year I'm working on my work, whatever I need to do, and I'm going to spend another 1,500 hours or 2,000 hours a year generating business. And that's what it takes. If you want to be a very successful lawyer, and there's a lot of attorneys out there that are making over 5 million or more per year doing this, generating business, that's what you need to do. That's part of the game. And you won't leave a law firm in most cases if you have a roster of good clients, and having a book of business gives you control over your career. And it's something obviously you don't have if you go in-house. The other thing is that once you go in-house, you're typically working for one client. And what does that mean? It means you're only getting exposed to one client's matters. But a lot of times, if an attorney goes to work for the government or in-house or a public interest organization, they're only going to be working for one client. People like that as they may believe in the mission of the client. And this is a big reason attorneys give for going to affiliated law firms. But when you're in a law firm, you get exposed to different types of clients. You get to work for clients you like, clients you don't, clients that have all sorts of different legal matters that you might not find if you're working in-house. And a lot of times attorneys will leave in-house because they don't want to represent multiple clients. So the other thing about working inside of a law firm is you have to be able to tolerate a lot of uncertainty regarding advancement and then remain in the firm. It's actually very scary that the people are in that position, that there's all that uncertainty. I don't know, a couple of years ago, someone asked me at a webinar something about seeming like I would have been a good lawyer. And they asked me why I left a law firm. And I will tell you point blank that that's a very easy answer. I thought that for me, it was a very straightforward answer. I was terrified with the uncertainty associated with working in a law firm. Now, if I had been doing it today, I don't think I would be because I have a better head on my shoulders. But back then I was because I saw partners losing their jobs. I always thought that if you made partner in a law firm, that was it. You were all set. I also saw people that weren't becoming partners after having dedicated 10, 15 years of their lives to a single firm. I didn't like that. I saw associates that were famous for political reasons. I mean, they were powerful partner with a lot of business, wanting to support someone that they liked more than this person. And that scared me. And I felt people often, sometimes they were inspired when they make partners. So you go to a law firm, you could devote 10 plus years of your life and then not make partner and get fired. There's actually one woman that's a famous political commentator in San Francisco. And I remember she was working for a big law firm. And the day they did make her partner, they also fired her. And I was like, wow. And I also saw a lot of associates getting the best cases. And that was the litigator because they were friends with someone. Other people get them busy work because they didn't have the same alliances. And everything just seemed very uncertain to me working in a law firm. And I didn't like the uncertainty. I felt that I could, if I was responsible for my career, meaning doing what I'm doing right now, or having my own law firm, I could find more certainty. That to me made more sense. And I believe that had I stuck with it, I could easily address all this uncertainty. But at the time, I couldn't see any way out of that. I left the law firm route, but a lot of attorneys like me make the same decision. And you can choose a company, the government or public interest or academic job because it's often will be a much more stable position without that sort of uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. People will go to some of these large firms and from day one, the odds are stacked against them. 98% of people that join those firms will not become partners and will have to leave. Is that worth it? I don't know. Would that time be better off spent starting a business or having a solo law firm or going to work in a company where you have more autonomy over your time? All important things to think about. And that's what my mind did. And that's why a law firm would not be smart if they were to hire someone like, because I wouldn't be able to tolerate those uncertain conditions. And law firms know that if you leave a law firm, you may not be able to tolerate that uncertainty and you'll probably leave again. So it's not in their interest to hire you. They need to hire people that are willing to take that risk And because law firms are uncertain, they go through ups and downs with the amount of work. Work can often slow down. And when work slows down, if you don't have the proper alliances or you don't have work that you can possibly do for paying clients and clients like you, or then law firms will let people go. They do it because they want to save money and keep the firm going when things are slow. And lawyers need to be prepared for that uncertainty. And what's a little scary too, if you start talking about what does that uncertainty mean? It means that a lawyer literally can bill like $2,500 hours a year for several years, 10 plus years. And then all of a sudden they think things are going well, but there's a recession or a few big matters or a litigation to settle. And then the law firm lets them go. So this is very difficult, being in a position where you're able to tolerate that type of employment insecurity, but it's how it works. Now, I would also add, this is just for people thinking about going in-house, that going in-house has just as many dangers as law firms, if not more, because in a law firm, you're actually generating money for the firm, but in a in-house position, what's happening is you're a cost center. You're a cost center, but also the law firm will have, or a company will typically have different general counsels. So they have one general counsel leaves, a new general counsel will come in. They'll get rid of the existing people there. They'll hire people that are loyal to them or that they know. If a CEO leaves, then oftentimes a new general counsel will be brought in too. They'll bring in their own general counsel and you'll lose those alliances. Companies go out of business all the time, all sorts of problems. Like you lose your job just as easily inside of a company, if not more. It's actually more likely for people to lose their jobs inside of companies than law firms, but you still have to put up with that level of uncertainty if you're working inside of a company, inside of a law firm. So partners often lose their jobs as partners. They become non-equity partners. They lose their job. People don't get advanced in different positions. So there's just a lot of uncertainty in a law firm. And if you take a job outside of a law firm, then most of the time a law firm senses or believes that you're unlikely to be able to tolerate that uncertainty. And working inside of a job inside of a law firm means also that the environment is very competitive and your peers will not always have your back. A law firm is a very competitive environment. Attorneys, you're competing with other attorneys for work, hours, clients, recognition from superiors. People are playing political games with you and undermining you. And there's all sorts of pressure. And because of those pressures, a lot of attorneys believe they'll go to environments where they think there's going to be a lot less pressure. And why wouldn't they? In order to escape that, they don't want to be part of that. And if you're coming back from a different environment, they realize you may have left because you didn't like the competitive nature of a law firm, but they're also going to recognize that you may be in a position where you are unable to deal with the competitive nature of a law firm and don't want to come back. So they're believing that they believe that the past is likely to repeat itself and you may be disappointed again. There's social components to working in a law firm that you may not be able to have when you go to another practice settings. In a law firm, if you're expected to socialize with attorneys and also clients quite often, and many attorneys inside of law firms will take clients out several times per month. This is very common. And in order to get work from other attorneys, you may have to socialize with them outside of work. You have to create friendships or relationships with other attorneys in order to get work. And a lot of attorneys just don't want to have anything to do with this. It's not something that they're interested in. They try to keep the personal life separate. And law firms want to hire people that they feel can be part of their own social environment. And a lot of attorneys inside of law firms will have friends at work, and they also want to hire people they can relate to socially. So another quick point, there's just a few other points and then we'll move on. But when you're working inside of a law firm, you're going to have to typically have a lot of availability, meaning weekends and holidays. And most law firms expect you to, if a client matter arises, to be able to drop everything and be able to work. And a lot of times people working at law firms don't like that. They actually, that the major reason why they do not want to work in a law firm anymore. They don't like this whole idea of having to be available all the time. Or get calls on the weekends and so forth. But that's just how it works inside of a law firm. You're working on time-sensitive matters, and you often do not have much control over your own schedule. So this is a big reason that people leave. Another thing is travel many times with the in-house or law firm. It's not that big of a deal, but that's one of the requirements. Most times in-house, you don't have to do that. And then many times when you're working at a law firm, you may have to do work that you feel is beneath you, but a lot of times it makes the case and just have to do work that you don't want to do. So it's just part of it, part of how it works. And then once you turn down an assignment, you often can get in a lot of trouble inside of a law firm if you're turning down work. So then say for doing the job, I want to spend a little bit of time on that, but you can see that once you leave a law firm, there's these 10 different reasons, which I personally think is a lot, that law firms are going to be very nervous about hiring you because it just doesn't look like you have the ability to do work the way they want to. But if you stay in a law firm, they typically do have ways of thinking or seeing that you probably can do the work. The other thing that's very important is that looking like you can be managed. Everybody, by the way, needs to be managed. The CEOs of corporations are managed by boards. All politicians are managed by other politicians. Presidents are managed by usually people working with them. So everybody has to be manageable, and everybody typically is managed by someone else. Entrepreneurs certainly aren't in some types of jobs, but everybody needs to be managed. And if you leave to go into another practice setting, it often looks like you're not someone that can be managed. And really what being manageable means is that you're going to be willing to do whatever's asked of you and not complain or create issues. And in every law firm, people support it and others don't. And businesses need to hire the types of people that are going to be happy and willing to do the sort of work that is asked of them. And sometimes people aren't. They may be not willing to do the type of work, or they may be difficult to be managed. And a lot of times attorneys will leave law firms because they may have conflicts with other attorneys, or they're unwilling or refuse work, don't like the hours, or have other issues that make them difficult to manage. And then there's just many different types of attorneys that are difficult to manage. And so if they're difficult to manage inside of a law firm and they have issues, they will often look for other practice settings. And in many cases, the attorney that's left is unhappy with the law firm. And if you've left, you have problems, almost by definition, you're going to be difficult to be managed because there's just things you didn't like about working in a law firm. And there's just aspects of it that you don't like. And attorneys will, when they leave law firms for reasons that have to do with them being manageable, they will say things like FaceTime was essential and I didn't understand why it mattered where I did the work. And so this was something the employer wanted. This is the attorney need to be managed. Attorneys will say things like, I was doing a lot of small matters for a lot of different clients and felt like I would be better off putting my efforts into one client. So that can be another sign of being managed. Sometimes people will say they had a crazy boss. And again, it's typically the attorney's responsibility to do the type of work that's asked or find someone else to work with, and leave an entire practice setting just because they don't like someone is usually not the solution. Cadence will say things like the firm hasn't made partners enough. They don't see a future. And to that as well, it's a sign that they might not be able to manage. People will talk about having to go to work every day and the weekends and things, and that got them burned out. That's a sign you can't be managed. We'll talk about morale being low because of different reasons. And that's another sign that you can be managed. People will talk about travel and not liking that. Again, that's another sign you can't be managed. People will talk about the social nature of the law firm and having to get ahead that way. That's just another sign to be managed if you have a difficult time getting around. Along with people will talk about their boss being a micromanager, and that's why they left. That's a sign you can't be managed. People will talk about how a firm was disorganized and they didn't like that. So that's, again, another sign that they can't be managed. They'll talk about just what else? Just a lot of different things like that. And so anytime you have a list of things that you don't like about working in a law firm and working for other people or getting along with other people, that's going to have a lot to do with whether or not the law firm believes you're able to be managed. And it's very important for someone to be able to manage. If you can't be managed inside of a law firm, then, and you did like that in your previous job, you're probably going to have that problem when you come back to a law firm. And law firms do not want to hire people that can't be managed, because you can put yourself in the shoes of the law firm. If you were the law firm, you certainly wouldn't want people working there that you couldn't control or didn't to avoid the control of the law firm. And then this is, again, one of the most important things for law firms and for any job where you're hiring someone. I don't know why. This is one of the mistakes that law firms make a lot. I see law firms sometime. I saw a law firm this morning that was interviewing someone had started in January this year at their law firm, and then I'd been at a couple other law firms for short periods of time before that. So it's a bad bet to hire someone. If you hire someone that's been at their previous job for a short period of time, that's a sign that they're not going to stick around. But the biggest sign that someone's not going to stick around is if you hire someone that went into a different practice setting. They just left working at a law firm, and then they go to work in a public interest organization. And those are some of the dumbest hires you possibly can make if you're a law firm, because the person's probably going to leave again. And most law firms understand this. And they hire people that are likely to stick around. Why would you want to hire someone that left your practice and wants to come back? They've already shown that whatever the reasons are, they're probably going to leave again. And they will. Sometimes one of the funniest things I see is attorneys from Yale Law School, or mainly Yale Law School, and sometimes they come out of school and take jobs with law firms, but not as often as taking jobs with public interest organizations and so forth. And then they'll leave the law firm oftentimes and go to work in some policy-related job, and then they'll want to come back to a law firm. And the law firms often will say yes, because they're so taken away by these people, the fact that they went to Yale. But the problem with that is that once they leave to go into one of these public interest or other organizations, they go to a law firm, they'll almost always leave again. It's just as common as anything. Law firms shouldn't be hiring people that are going to come there and leave, because it costs a lot of money to get attorneys up to speed. It's not good for morale when an attorney is hired and then leaves. Clients don't like it when attorneys are hired and then starting work on their matters and then leave. Law firms hire, if you were a business, you would want to hire people that are likely to stick around. Just imagine if you were hiring like a nanny to take care of your children, and that nanny had worked in different practice settings. I don't know. They had multiple jobs, for example, each lasting no more than a month or a couple months. That if you hired them, the same thing would probably happen there. Or all their jobs, they worked for people for a while, like helping them. But then they suddenly started working in hospitals, and would they stick around? It's just law firms want to hire people that are likely to stick around, and you would too if you're a law firm. And most law attorneys that leave law firms and go into other practice settings and then back to law firms, most of the time they don't stay very long. They almost always leave again. It's a bad hire. And once someone leaves the law firm and realizes they don't have to deal with all the stresses that I previously told you about, like what it takes to do a job with the billable hours and the ability to be available all the time and getting along with people, getting business, dealing with uncertainty. Most of the time, the attorney will get comfortable in that other practice setting. And because of that, they're much more likely to stay in that other practice setting. And when they do return, they'll start remembering back to when they had less stress and they were less accountable, and they'll start playing their escape again. Almost always happens. It's very rare for an attorney to go in-house or to some other practice setting and then come back to a law firm and stay. Most of the time they don't. For example, would be a couple breaking up and trying to get together after a long absence. It rarely works out. They may have idolized different aspects of their relationship that worked when they were together before, but they still, when they get back together and they realize the same things are wrong and unlikely to work again. There was this guy in LA that had this, he was a very wealthy guy, but no one knew who he was. But he had this kind of like list, and I don't know why I found this, but there was this, he's told like he had this list of rules that he followed that he believed made him very successful. And one of his rules was never rehire anyone, because if you rehire someone, they're almost always going to leave again for the same reasons that they left before. And I remember reading that rule when I was very young, just starting my business, and I kept these rules for some reason on my desk because I thought they were cool. And there were just a lot of interesting rules that he followed. There's 20 of them. But one of the rules was never rehire anyone. And so every time I've ever done that and they've come back, they've always left. They come back and then they're unhappy again. So they leave. And so the same things that annoy you or annoy an attorney when they leave a law firm to go in-house or another practice setting will just annoy them again. And they'll quit again. It almost always happens. There's just, if it's a relationship that ended, there's still kind of pressure in the background in a romantic relationship of things they didn't like before. Almost always comes up. There might be trust issues and all sorts of things that happen the next time as well. So never rehire anyone. And again, I've done that so many times and it never works out. It's the same thing with attorneys that leave law firms to go to another practice, and they weren't happy in law firms for whatever reason, and then they're unhappy again. So it just happens. They do so for the same reasons, because they have to bill hours and have to be accountable for their time. Their time actually has to make sense. So what does that mean? Like, you can't just sit there and write down like some random stuff a day after day because clients paid for it. It's got to actually be real work most of the time. So you can't blow off your time. You can't sit there like you might in-house doing it for several hours because no one's checking on your work. When you're in a law firm, you're accountable. You have to actually write down what you're doing and how much time it took. In a law firm, you have to develop your own business. I mean, most cases, it's if you can't do it in a certain amount of time, especially when you're senior, then you will have to leave. And so that's another reason they don't like it. You have to be able to work on all sorts of different types of clients, like I said earlier. You have to do work of a certain caliber. In-house, if you're working for different people inside the company, they're not always aware of the type of quality of work that needs to be done. They just don't know because they're not attorneys. And so when you're working inside of a law firm, you have to do that. So attorneys will resent that often. Then again, uncertainty regarding advancement, competitive environment, socializing, available all the time, required to travel, doing work that you may not like. So it's all the same things about doing the job. And again, most attorneys doing that often, they're difficult to manage because they just won't do those things. And so they'll leave again. And if someone didn't want to do certain things and left, it's likely to happen before. You need to understand that. And the final one, that if people take a job in another practice setting, is that attorneys will believe that you may not want to do the job. And so they'll assume that you went into another practice setting because of that. And attorneys try to get jobs in law firms again are often very good at saying certain things to convince the law firm that they want the job. But law firms know that they're a certain type of business. And if you've rejected them, you've basically wanted a job in another practice setting that is different. So public interest, academia, or the government is much different than working in a law firm. And the types of work that a public interest organization does are often completely different from what a law firm does. Academia involves a different set of skills. When I talk to attorneys from most of the time from public interest organizations and academia, I say to myself, what the heck are these people? It's literally like a different personality type and way of thinking and structured thinking that you find typically from what a law firm requires. A law firm is just a completely different animal. If you're smart, if you can pick up on the stuff the way I do, you can see how different they are. Government positions are very slow paced compared to private practice. They involve separate work responsibility. It to me is almost humorous. I remember I worked in the Justice Department one summer. Now, I'm not saying all divisions are like this. This is how all positions are working for the government and the Justice Department, anything like that. But when I was there, I was in this giant building, Main Justice. You could be there at 7 a.m. and you wouldn't hear anything. There would be no one around. And then you could be there at 5:30 at night and there would hardly be anybody there. These positions, people come in and they don't work long hours compared to a law firm. I remember when I was at my first law firm job, I was there on the 4th of July and almost the entire firm was there. So it's just the level of work that's required in different practice settings and what different practice settings are like mean that most of the time when people leave to go to a practice setting like that, they're not going to be interested in a law firm. And when even a lot of times attorneys work in other practice settings will want to come back because of the salaries, but people often think they could fool law firms and coming back to work there despite for the salaries. But most law firms are way too smart. They'll take a look at your resume. They'll take a look at what you're doing. They'll realize you're not part of the law firm tribe. They'll realize you probably would leave again. And those choices will basically be a permanent black mark on your record that will prevent you from getting a position with them. Now, the final thing I want to talk about, and I don't have as much to say about it, but if you have never worked in a law firm, a lot of times people will decide they want to take a job with the government or something, or work. I've seen people go directly work in companies right out of school. And so they've never worked in a law firm. It's the same thing that the law firm doesn't really have any idea whether or not you can do the work, be managed, commit to the job, and that you really want the job. They're basically going to assume that you can't do the job. Every in-house position typically has different standards of work that are required. Most public interest will have different standards of work, and they don't. Law firms, as I told you earlier, other law firms have an idea of what the type of work other law firms do. And because of that, people can understand what the type of work you're doing and the quality of work that's required. If you're working in a law firm, and then you have certain habits that don't get broken, but in other practice settings, they just have no idea. And it's very difficult for a law firm to hire you. And the idea that's also important to understand is that it's very difficult for law students. It's more difficult for law students to get law firm positions most of the time than it is to get jobs in other practice settings. For example, if you're graduating from law school and you want to go to work for the Social Security Administration or something like that, you can often get a position. Sometimes small companies I've seen will hire law school graduates to help them with basic corporate things. But most attorneys, having their choice when they're in law school, will try to get positions in law firms. They'll try to be law clerks in the summer or work in the Social Security office and that sort of thing. But if you don't get that experience, not Social Security office, I'm sorry, for a summer associate job in a firm, and all law firms know, especially if you're coming out of a top law school, that you would not turn down working in a place with a high salary, for example, for another practice setting if you could get the job with a good law firm. Law firms will basically assume if you come from another practice setting that there might be you've never worked in a law firm, that there might just be something wrong with you that prevented you from getting one of those jobs. And they don't know what it is. It could be you're a bad interviewer. It could be about bad grades. It could be having personal problems. Every year, even with the best law schools, there's people that come out. And when I say even the best law schools, I'm talking about top 10 law schools up and down. There's always people that come out that were unable to get jobs as summer associates with large firms or small firms, didn't work in those types of firms, never got that experience in the resume. They weren't summer associates, they weren't clerks. They just never got any law firm experience. And again, this is very common. Attorneys that don't get that experience have a very rough time when they're trying to get a job. And if you have never gotten a job and you went directly to another practice setting after law school, law firms will assume that you don't have all these things that it takes to work for law firms, which is the ability to bill hours, to work for different partners and people, to socialize clients, doing the type of work, being able to work the number of hours, problems, solutions, to keeping them up at the same pace as their peers in a law firm. And so law firms have no idea if you can do any of these things that it requires to do a job. So they just don't hire you. I see attorneys with no law firm experience try to join law firms after having been in other practice settings, and just generally does not go that well. They never received the training. They don't learn the work habits. They may not have had mentors or people training them. It's just not a good thing for most times. For most of the time, they just can't do the work. And law firms, if you're a law firm, would do exactly what law firms do, and they just don't take the risk of hiring people. They don't know whether to manage. The next one, you haven't worked in a law firm. So They don't know how you might have been managed there. That's a mystery to them. And so if there's no idea about that, then the law firm will have issues. They don't know how you take orders from people. They don't know if you're a team player or not. They don't know if you're willing to do the FaceTime required. They don't know if you're able to work with multiple different people. And so not having an understanding of whether or not you've been managed will also not be as interested. They don't know if you're going to commit because they haven't seen you in a law firm environment. So there's no way for them to see that. When I was working in the law firm, I remember reading a book literally from the moment I started, because I knew what working in a law firm was going to be like. And so I actually wasn't ready. I might have been right. I think, no, after I've been in the law firm about 3 months, I was reading the book about alternative legal careers, and because I just wasn't interested in working in a law firm. And so it's very dangerous for law firms to hire people that have never worked in a law firm, because they obviously aren't interested in it. And then the final one is that if you've been in another practice, you join another practice setting right out of school, that you may not want to work in a law firm again. I speak with law firms all the time that are candidates that took positions in other practice settings, and such as working in prosecutor's office and law professors and so forth, that obviously didn't want to work from law firms right when they got out of school. And the problem with this is that once you do take a position in another practice setting, you're pretty much demonstrating that this is where you want to be in another practice setting. And law firms are going to be much less interested. Meaning, if you wanted to work in a law firm, you would have gotten a position in a law firm right out of school. And law firms want to hire people who want the position. And it's just that they want to hire people that really want the work. And then there's some exceptions that I'll just get into real quickly. If you are a law student or you're currently working in one of these exceptions, you could come from another practice setting. Sometimes if you did a clerkship immediately after law school, then especially if you had previous law firm experience as a summer associate, it can be much easier if you can get a position with a law firm if you're currently clerking. And these are mainly for federal district court and appellate clerkships. And then in some cases with certain markets like New York and big markets, you can sometimes do this with an appellate clerkship or a Supreme Court clerkship in that market. One thing I just want to bring up, and this is if you're summer, so if you were a law student watching this or a current clerk, when a law firm hires clerks, it's not often enough just clerking for like a federal district judge. They also want to see that you were able to get a position like that during the summer, a position in a law firm during the summer, at least after your second year of law school in a large law firm, because that would show a desire to get that position to work in a large law firm. And working in a clerkship, I'm just sorry to say, is often not enough. They want to see an interest in a law firm and then using a clerkship to basically improve your experience. So this is a very important point. So just because you get a job as a law student with a federal district judge or sometimes people do appellate clerkships, but with a federal district judge does not necessarily mean that you're going to be able to get a job in a law firm, or at least a big law firm, unless you've done something the summer. Many times you can also, once you get a few years of experience with a law firm and you decide you want to go clerk for a federal judge or a prestigious state court clerkship, you can generally do that for about a year and come back. If you do it for more than 1 year, like 2 years, it will make it look like you would rather be a clerk than work in a law firm. Law firms won't be interested in you. Sometimes there are niche practice areas where an attorney to work in-house from the practice setting and get a job in a law firm again. Patent prosecution is one of the big ones, and that would apply often, sometimes regardless of whether or not the person has law firm experience, but most of the time they want you to have law firm experience. There's other practice areas, I would say healthcare, executive compensation, RISA, food and drug law. Sometimes people are marketable in those niche practice areas without law firm experience. And if you are practicing attorney watching this or a law student, I would say that these are all very good practice areas to get into. They have actually good practice areas over the past 20, 5 years that I've been doing this job, they've always been good practice areas. And attorneys in healthcare, executive compensation, ERISA, and food and drug law are almost always employable and end up getting positions fairly quickly in law firms, almost without regard to their experience level. I'll just tell you a quick funny story about a healthcare attorney that I was representing not too long ago. Actually, it was, when I say not too long ago, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. But she was from Ohio, working in a hospital and interviewing with a well-respected law firm in Colorado by phone. And she had never worked in a law firm. She was senior and had maybe 15, 20 years of experience. And she got on this interview. This was like a second round interview with a well-respected law firm, and brought her husband along to ask questions and still got an offer. There are some practice areas that I can't even believe this happened, but there are some practice areas where there's a lot of demand, and where if you are doing those practice areas, there's not enough attorneys to do the work. And because of that, you can be marketable in a lot of different areas. Just with regards to patent prosecution, I don't want to waste too much time with anybody, but it's important to tell you this. Patent prosecution used to be very marketable. I remember when I first started, I had a candidate that was in Seattle, and a law firm in Palo Alto made an offer. The law firm offered him some sort of salary, and I don't remember what it was, but it was a market salary. He said he wanted $75,000 more. And this is back when the salaries of senior attorneys were under $200,000. They said yes. And then he came back and said he wanted a bonus of like $50,000 to start. And they said yes. So it's just a different time. Now there's a lot more patent prosecutors, and so many people went into it because of the market demand. Now there's more than enough patent prosecutors to go around. But if you have very niche experience, you can often get positions. So sometimes corporate may be very busy and there's a demand for them, and law firms may take people from in-house, but again, it's pretty rare. Sometimes attorneys will be hired away from their clients. I've seen some very good law firms hire people from that are their clients, so they will see how hard the attorney is working in-house, the quality of their work, and those firms will be like, wow, like this person is very good, but we would love to have him working in our law firm. It's very common actually for law firms to do that. I've seen that happen several times where a law firm will hire someone from its client. They do a very good job. And then just things like prosecutors, government appointees, elected officials, law firms will also hire them, often for the optics of it because it looks good. But prosecutors are often hired for white collar criminal law type work, so they'll hire them. And sometimes important government officials will be hired because it looks good after they complete their public service. The idea, just to wrap this up, is that if you want to work in a law firm, it's very important you don't leave. Leaving makes it very difficult for you to come back. Law firms prefer hiring people that are coming from other law firms. And I'll just wrap this up with a few things. That the reason this is such an important webinar, and I tried to provide a lot of detail for everyone, is because these are huge life decisions that you make. If you choose to leave a law firm and go into another practice, you are making a decision that will have an impact on you and the rest of your life, the ability of you to support your family, the ability of you to advance economically, the ability of you to work in the long term, the ability of you to be independent. All of these things change when you leave a law firm, because a law firm is actually a pretty wonderful thing if you stick with it. And the reason is, I said this at the beginning, I'll say it again. In a law firm, your skills are always going to be kept sharp. You're working for paying clients. You need to do a certain level of work. Otherwise, the clients aren't going to pay. The market economy is operating in the background. It's strong, and you will continue to get work to the extent you do good work. Not only that, but if you're an associate, the partners you're working for will demand a certain level of work. Once you become a partner, the clients you're working for will demand a certain level of work. So you're basically not escaping the market. You're part of the market, and the better you are, the better you are. And you have the ability to bring in clients. Once you start bringing in clients, what happens is the law firm works for you, meaning the law firm is there to provide an office, to provide computers, to provide administrative secretarial support, to hire associates for you, to do all these things. And if you don't like that, then you can take your clients and go somewhere else. You have power. You're not working for anybody anymore. You're running your own business. And again, that's independence. That's the ability to increase your book of business and increase how well you take care of your family. All of these things, or save money so you can retire early or whatever. All these things are huge, and they give you the ability to continue work the rest of your career. Whereas if you go in-house, you could lose your job if a new CEO is hired. You could lose your job if new GC's hired. You could lose your job if things get slow at the company and they decide they want to cut back things that are cost centers. You could lose your job if the company goes out of business or has financial problems. I've seen people, it's the craziest thing. I've seen people get in-house jobs after having these law firm jobs where they're doing incredibly well and move to some small town in Colorado or Minnesota or something, buy a house and then be there. You start working a couple of weeks later, lose their jobs when they're in-house and then not be able to get back to law firms. So these are major life decisions that you make when you leave a law firm. And a law firm has a lot of benefits. And if you're currently in a government jobs can be very stable. You do it for and retire. And same thing with some in-house jobs. You can do them a long time and retire. But the excitement of working on the best matters and is almost always in a law firm. The ability to build your own business and not have to report to higher ups and things is almost always in a law firm. That would be what I would leave you with. Other thing I would just say is you can start your own business in a law firm. If you don't want to work for a law firm with your clients, you can develop a niche specialty outside of a law firm and go to the work there. And I don't like it when people put themselves in positions where they can't work in a law firm because of early career choices. That was what I wanted to leave you with today. What I will do now is we'll take a quick break of just 1 or 2 minutes. When we come back, I will answer questions. The questions can be about the things that we covered in this webinar today, and any questions about that, or they can be about questions you may have about your career. All right, so just give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up a Word document. Start it. All right, so I will start with the questions. Let me see here. First one. Because first question is, can you go from working as a patent examiner at the USPTO to a reputable mid-sized firm as a patent attorney? If so, how many years of experience would you recommend? Yes, you can do that. I've seen that happen quite a few times. I've actually placed people from me to mid-sized firms. So the issue with any type of a position you're looking for is it's going to be the question that law firms are asking, are there people from law firms at your level doing the type of work you do, in your market? What does that mean in the market you're interested in? So what that means is that if you are working in, I don't know what the market would be, but say you're working in Las Vegas or say you want to work in, maybe you're a remote patent prosecutor for the USPTO and you're working in Las Vegas, and a law firm has a position for someone with experience doing, I don't know, with an electrical engineering degree working on transistors. I mean, I don't know what would be, but if they were to put a position out, would they find a similar person that's coming from a law firm that they would have to hire from the US? And if the answer is no, then they will hire you. But if it's no, they won't. So law firms are just by nature would always prefer, but prefer people from other law firms, just for all the reasons that I listed today. And if you're not coming from a law firm, then and you're coming from the USPTO, they're more likely to hire you if you're from a law firm. So how many years of experience would you recommend? So I would always recommend trying to get out of the USPTO sooner rather than later. So after 1 year, I would try it. After, I would just keep trying. And the markets that you always want to look at is, so if you're trying to get a job from the USPTO, big mistake that a lot of people make is that obviously the USPTO has a large office in Washington, D.C. So people from Washington, D.C., that are in the USPTO are always trying to get jobs with firms in Washington, D.C. And the firms in Washington, D.C. are overwhelmed with people trying to do patent prosecution in their firms. And so they almost never hire people from the USPTO. The smartest thing you could do if you're with the USPTO is to look at smaller markets where there's not a lot of people like people. So that would be one of the first things. And then also look at smaller firms. So that's really the best thing you can do. What I would say to you is what's happened recently that's making the process a lot more difficult. Attorneys coming from the USPTO is that there's now the remote work has really taken off. So what that means is that people from patent attorneys are located, or not necessarily in offices, but they're scattered all over the country. And that's actually okay because to be admitted to the USP, you basically need to take the patent bar. And you went to the patent bar, which is federal. And once you take the patent bar, you can work basically anywhere because you're practicing in front of the practicing US. I wanted to give everyone on this call or webinar right now just a little breakdown. If you're ever considering, you think you want to do intellectual property law, for example. You're trying to say, I want to do intellectual property law. That's fine, but most of the money and work goes to intellectual property law. So the answer to this question is attorneys come out of school all the time saying this. Sometimes even go get LLMs in intellectual property law. But it's just, the whole thing is crazy to me. I want to do intellectual property law. And with no idea why they want to do it, or I don't know. But people say this all the time. I want to do intellectual property law. And they say this when they're in school. Most of the money and work goes to litigators and litigators, patent attorneys, et cetera, are admitted to the patent bar. So that's where most of the work goes. So the best firms will have their attorneys that are litigating will be admitted to the patent bar. Or they'll have people like that. So what is the patent bar? So the patent bar gives you the ability to prosecute patents. And that basically means that you can write patents, et cetera. And then because of that, you can fight in IP litigation, different patent related things. Because a lot of IP litigation is about violating patents, various patents. So what happens? Best IP litigators have the patent bar, and people that are doing patent prosecution firms have the patent bar. In order to take the patent bar, you have to either be well versed in science, meaning you have to have taken a bunch of science classes, which are either life sciences or hard sciences. So life science, which are chemistry, bio, et cetera. Or hard sciences, would be things like computer science, physics, engineering, electrical, chemical, all these sorts of things. I'm just spending a little bit of time on this and telling you about this because this is just to take the patent bar. So you have to have one of these. It's either one would be life sciences or two would be hard science. So this is really where all the money goes. If you're trying to work in IP, you can certainly be a trademark litigator without the patent bar and a few other things. But in order to do IP, you really need these. Unless you have this stuff, you're never really going to be at the top of IP related work. There are IP litigators do things without having the patent bar. But in general, if you want to do patent bar, the most sophisticated IP work, you need to have this. And pretty much that's where most of the money in terms of litigation and stuff goes. Now, it's not always the case, but generally the case. And this question means they are working for the patent bar. So what a patent bar attorney does is they basically will approve or reject applications for patents. And then attorneys will come and be filing those patents. So the work of approving and rejecting is different than the idea of convincing a patent bar attorney that a patent is valid. So that's the answer to the question. I spent a little bit of time on that because this is actually a very important question for attorneys that are interested in doing IP related work. So I just want to make a couple points. The first is that if you want to go into IP, with the exception of trademark law, most of the work, the IP litigation work goes to people that are admitted to the patent bar or have the scientific background, because most IP litigation is related to patents. So you have to have that. I want to make this point because so many people want to go into IP litigation and don't really understand what it's about. And then in order to take the patent bar, you need to have a pretty strong scientific background in either life sciences or hard sciences. And then in order to take it. And this is where all the money for the people doing the work is. And what's interesting also about patent is the life sciences patent, which is your bio, et cetera, actually more bio. But typically the law firms will even require a PhD as opposed to just a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. So that's how that works. And again, sorry everyone for spending so much time on this, because I know that 90% of the people on this webinar are probably not trying to do IP, but this is the way it works. And one other thing I just wanted to bring up to everyone, I did already say this, but I want to say it again. This person is basically saying, I got out of school and I decided to go to work for the government instead of working for a private firm. So the reason it's harder for someone that worked for the government instead of a private firm is this person that's a patent examiner, meaning they're examining patents, and the patent bar is basically saying that I'm working for the government. I'm deciding if I approve or reject patents, or if I do reject them, give them reasons for rejection, they come back. If you're working in a law firm doing patent work, you're trying to convince a patent examiner to do stuff. So those are different skills. And so that's an example of why it's so much harder for people to get jobs coming from the government as opposed to a private firm. And so it is difficult to get a job as a patent examiner than if you're coming from a law. Thank you, by the way, for all these questions. People are asking really good ones. So if you have more questions based on the existing ones I've asked, then feel free to also ask more. Okay. As someone who has worked primarily in public interest law, I'm concerned about transition to a law firm environment. What are some strategies I can use to demonstrate my value to potential employers despite my different backgrounds? So this person is saying that they are coming from a public interest background, and because they're working for a public interest background, I'm not going to repeat this, but they want to transition into another So just to, again, everyone should write down these questions, and there are a bunch of articles on BCG that track each of them, but it's, can you do the job? Will you commit to the job? Can we manage you? Want the job? Do we like it? Okay. So I was law school yesterday. It was asking me to give presentations to their people on their LLM program, and that were not able to having a hard time getting jobs. They wanted me to do a workshop, give a presentation. So I want to talk about something very obvious and simple that most people are when they're having a hard time getting a job. So are you having a hard time getting a job, having a hard time getting a job? What do you do? What do you do if not getting a job? You're unemployed. Unemployed. What do you do if you look like a bad kid? What do you do if you didn't? What do you do if you were fired? Went to a bad law school. There are no bad law schools, by the way. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And you learn the same thing in every law school. Went to a low-ranked law school. Again, doesn't matter. Have issues. I don't know. Tourette syndrome. I don't care. Whatever. What do you do? What do you do if you feel like there's something wrong with you and you can't get a job? The answer to this question is about the most basic and easy to understand and simplistic answer that works almost all the time, that no one seems to ever grasp, and sits around chronically unemployed. It's just so stupid. I really don't understand that it's so simple, but I'll let you know what it is. It's very simple. It's the law of supply and demand. Money flows where there's scarcity, right? Where there's scarcity. You can't sell ice Eskimos, or you cannot sell ice to Eskimos, which a lot of people try to do. I don't know, Eskimos. But you can sell water to people middle of the Sahara without water, right? So this is the most basic, and I hope everyone is paying attention to this one, because this is just so basic, but it will change your life and your career if you understand it, but no one does. What do? You contact, send your resume to law firms, generally in small markets, and small markets all over state you want to work in, or different states. It's really simple. Very simple. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude here, but I've done this for thousands of people. They've almost all gotten jobs. And I'm not saying I've done it always through BCG. I've helped people do this. But there are plenty of people that are in smaller markets, the firms that are in smaller markets that can't find anybody at all. I've had law firms call me up in smaller markets and beg me to send them people. There are law firms in small markets that don't have any attorneys in. Every attorney, this is dumbest move ever. I'm sorry not to be rude here, but dumbest move ever is to try to get jobs in the largest firms. If there's going to be other people like you, there's going to be more people like, if there are going to be lots of more, there's going to be tons of, lots of others more qualified than you, seeking the same jobs in your market. So I don't understand why people don't do this. I see people sitting around in huge markets for months, years, trying to get a job, and nothing happens. But all that would need to happen is they would simply send their resume to a law firm in a small market, or even small suburbs of where they're located. And that's it. Some markets all over, I guess, in the state. So that's it. This works. It's the law of supply and demand. All you do is you send your resume to people in places, in firms where there's no one applying or don't have a lot of attorneys, and you will get a job. There are places like this all over every state. There's some small towns and different things. What is an example of even the smallest, largest cities I'm just giving you an example, right? And I'm not saying you have to go to work in Nebraska, but you take a look at this in small and large cities by population in Nebraska. So these are your cities in Nebraska. Now, as a general rule, everybody on this call is probably not from Nebraska. You're probably from a large area of the country, like New York or Boston or something, or you might be from Los Angeles or Chicago. That's most of the people, but very few people would think about sending their resume to a law firm in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm sure there's a ton of law firms in Lincoln, Nebraska. There's probably hundreds in Omaha. And then when you get down here, there's probably even law firms in Papillon, Nebraska. Now, I've never heard of Papillon, Nebraska. So let's do that. Law firms in Papillon, Nebraska. So here are law firms in Papillon, Nebraska, and look at them all. There's tons. So there are a lot of law firms in Papillon, Nebraska. Now, people sit around and they're unemployed and they wonder why they're unemployed, but there are law firms all over the country, and there are tons of them in every practice area and they're in every city. And again, I'm using like a city that's a place that most people wouldn't even think of working. But if you're an unemployed corporate attorney sitting around Chicago and you said, I want to work in Omaha, and you were coming from a big firm, you could get a job in Omaha. These firms would probably jump up and down to hire you, or Lincoln or Bellevue. So people, there's no reason to be unemployed. This whole idea of being unemployed. Now, I'm not saying you should even do this with Nebraska. You could do it by, let's say you were in Illinois. Illinois is huge. So I'm just giving you an example. So you have, most populous city, list of municipalities. Okay, so it's Chicago. Okay, so you've got Chicago. And then you start going down here. And what about, these are counties. I don't know how this is. These are municipalities. These are not, I don't know how this page is so large, by the way. Look what just happened. It froze my computer. But you can get the idea here. What about Alton? What about, let's see some of these cities. Beach Park, look at this. Bellevue, Illinois. I've never heard of that, but that's 42,000 people. Bloomington, Illinois. I bet they have 100 plus law firms there. So my only point to everyone, I just want to be very clear about this, because no one is, as far as I know, anyway, most attorneys do not hear this, but you need to be able to send your stuff and find law firms in small to large markets. If you don't think if you don't think you can get a job. I'm sorry to pound on this, but it makes me so freaking mad that people are unemployed, because this procedure of finding places in places all over the country. If you're in Illinois, I can't even begin to see how many places I've just found here. Comment City is a big area, or there be from Charleston's a big area, or Chicago's a huge area. There's probably over 1,000 small law firms in this area that you could find. Instead of trying to work at freaking Kirkland and Ellis or something, or Sidley and Austin, you have to realize that there is so much opportunity in the legal market that people are sitting around like all freaking depressed and thinking like something's wrong and that they can't get a job. And it's like it's like dumber and dumber. There is so much freaking opportunity up. There are so many freaking places. Cicero, I don't know. I guess it's Cook County, but that's a big area. There's so many freaking areas. I had this one thing happen that blew my mind. And I'm sorry to spend so much time on this question, but it actually opens up a very important question that's relevant to everyone here. So I had this thing happen where I think it was 2000, this giant recession. At the time, people were walking around New York City like a bomb had hit, and because it's so much layoffs and things. And so I had an office in New York, and then I had an office in Chicago. And so I told the recruiters in Chicago that the dumbest thing to do during this huge recession, last few years, is to send your candidates to big firms in Chicago. They will not get jobs, interviews, because every single law firm in Chicago is getting multiple hundreds of openings or resumes for each opening, because that's everyone's going to know. So just take your candidates and send them to suburban firms, and those suburban firms work for smaller clients. Those clients are not sent to these changes. They're blowing away, and they'd be happy to have someone with good qualifications coming to the firm. So these recruiters in Chicago had the best year ever had. Never thought of this. And wow, Harrison, what a great idea. You walk on water. Well, it's the most obvious thing. And we can then say I walk on water. It's a great idea. And again, most of the time, doing something. Anyway, the point is, did very well. Had their best years ever in the middle of the most horrible recession ever, because we're just looking at in smaller markets. Meanwhile, the recruiters in New York were still trying to bang away and send people to these giant firms. They were on the phone, like multiple lines ringing all the time and taking call after call from people looking for jobs and giving them career advice. And I went to their office and they were just battle struck. And one of them was like, I haven't eaten in 3 days or something, she was joking, meaning that her recruiting practice was going so horribly that she was not eating, and which wasn't true. She was fine, living with her husband. The point is that they were just devastated. Nothing was happening. And all they would have had to do was start sending people to firms in smaller markets. So I'm just saying the same thing to you. You do not want to ever worry about getting a job, because there are tens of thousands of places you could work, tens of thousands, no matter what is going on in the economy. There's always demand. So I want to just make sure that I made that point. So this person's saying, how can I demonstrate that I can get a job? I'm coming from a public interest background. So this is question, by the way, I just want to answer this real quickly. Who is this question for? This question is also for people in-house, for people in-house, academics, whatever. Academics. So the problem when you go to work in public interest law is you're basically showing to some extent that do you want the job? You're probably a public interest person is probably against certain kinds of clients. So that could be large companies. Okay, so that's what's going on. So if you're working in-house, you're probably going to be, if you're working for a public interest organization, probably going to be against certain types of clients, but you're not going to be against other types of clients. So that would be immigration law, it could be personal injury, it could be things, it could be, you get the idea. So there's always criminals, You might criminals. I think they're being defined a reason as a public interest attorney that you would like to work in a law firm. So I think if I was a public interest person trying to get a job in a law firm, I would basically say that I'm from, you have a story, and by fighting for people, government or whatever, government, big people, or others or whatever, or wrongly accused. So all those things. So you come up with a story about the kind of person you are, and then with that you have a story. So yes. So if the job is for just immigration, and then yes, you can learn it, and you can learn it, but you are for people that are hurt or whatever, you're committed to a purpose. That's right. Know if you can be managed, maybe, I don't know, but maybe you want the job and they'll like you because you're committed to some helping or whatever. So the idea is I'm just giving you, the idea of all this is that if you want to work as in a law firm and you're doing public interest law, you probably want to choose a practice area that is going to support. So public interest attorney is not going to get hired in a major top 100 or 200 law firm or some general corporate firm or an intellectual property firm or anything. They're more likely to get hired if they commit to a practice area. You can have a very good story about your practice area. If you're public interest and you're suing people that are injured by, I don't know, oil spills or something, then you would be like a perfect personal injury attorney. There's just different ways you have to portray yourselves. Actually, coming out of public interest, what I would do if I was representing you is I would basically figure out what you do, just persons for the underdog or the injured or whatever, and then try to sell you as a immigration or personal injury or criminal law or family law. There's just all these types of practice areas. So just because you take a job in one of these types of practice areas doesn't mean that a skilled recruiter or someone couldn't potentially get you a job. It's just that you need to figure out how to package yourself. And then you also need to be trying to sell what you have to people. Okay. In this particular piece of information, I just gave you about getting jobs in small markets and stuff. This will change the direction of your career, if you understand. Okay. So what are some of the common misconceptions law firms may have about candidates who worked outside of their setting, and how can I address these effectively in my job search? I think I talked about that, but the common misconceptions are that they do not want to be in a law firm, want to be in a law firm, about the most firm, or they could not get a job. But again, you asked how. Sorry. So you asked me about you're asking about the misconceptions. But again, anybody, how can you address these? You're not going to. Most people, if you're trying to get a job, and there's a lot of other people competing for the same job or competing to get in the same firm, then you're basically selling ice to Eskimos. So you do not want to sell ice to Eskimos. You want to understand the law of supply and demand. And if you're trying to overcome these things, your objective is to find people without people like you. So that could mean smallest firms in your market, or it could be smaller markets, which is easy. So this is what you do. It's very simple. You look at the smallest firms in your market, or you look at smaller markets. There's really nothing else to it. That's it. And that's how you overcome this. And that's how everyone overcomes it. So it's not that big of a deal. You can do it, but you have to look at either smaller markets or the smallest firms in your market. And most people in most profession, if you're an engineer, you could be transferred to another city and would go, or you would, if you're a certain type of engineer, you would try to find a job, or doctors to work in residencies and places. So people always will try to go and get jobs in different types of markets, depending on what, things. You can always look at different markets. Okay. One other thing too, I wanted to bring up, I'm sorry to bumbling over this, but a lot of times people think, oh, if I go to a smaller market, I'll never make a lot of money. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you will make a lot of money off it. And the reason is because there will be nobody else to compete with. You will get all the work. Yes, no, just going to a small market is not a bad decision. Okay, I have been contemplating the switch from corporate law to public interest work, but I'm worried about how it might affect my prospects beside your general law firm. Can you shed some light on how law firms are going to do this kind of career? Well, yes. So if you're trying to work in a large law firm, again, it will be next to impossible. It'll be very difficult if you're trying to go from corporate law to public interest work. They are completely different. One is transactional. One is maybe you can do corporate law, public interest, but probably not. One is transactional. The other is not. You're going to have a very difficult time if you try to come back. What do? You certainly can get a job. Coming back, you would apply to smaller markets and or smaller firms doing corporate law and then build from there. So how does that look like? What happens a lot of times is attorneys will leave one market. It could be they will leave to go do something like public interest work and then want to come back to a law firm. Many times in order to come back, instead of starting their in a large law firm again, which would be again next to impossible, the law firm, they could start in a small law firm. And then when they start in a law firm, if you're talented, going to work in the public interest may have given you also more kind of vibrancy to your background and make you more interesting. Or I'm just giving you some random thoughts, but it may have actually been a good choice for you to go to work there because it'll give you more perspective and you like it. But when you come back, you'll have to work in a smaller firm in a large market where you'll have to work for a smaller or in a smaller market. That's it. So it's not everyone can come back, but you're not going to be able to work in the largest markets. And you're going to have to work for firms that would have a difficult time hiring you normally. My advice to you is that if you do not like corporate law and you want to go into public interest work, that you should do it. So that's exactly what it is. You should not be held back by wanting to be in a law firm. If you don't want to be in a law firm, you don't want to be in a law firm. And that's what it is. Too many people, by the way, stay in law firms far beyond when they're happy. They get into situations where they need the money, where they have to support their families, and where they're going in and doing something every day that they don't enjoy, that doesn't make them happy, but they're suddenly obligated to do because sometimes it's just they have a belief that they can never stop doing it, or they'll somehow look bad to their family or to their law school classmates. I don't know. But people stick with this stuff much, much longer than they can to make themselves happy. So if you can see yourself not being happy, practicing law in a law firm, and you know it deep in your heart, then you should get out honestly while you can. There's no sense in putting yourself through something that doesn't make you happy. It's just, there's no sense to it. Now, I do want to bring up a couple of points though, is why there is sense to it. So there is sense to staying in a law firm for the following reasons, to staying for the fun, even if you don't like it, and I'll tell you why. And this is actually a very important piece of advice as well. And so something that could change your career if you understand it. Sometimes these Q&As are very important for this sort of reason. So the idea is between it's apprenticeship. So if you're a doctor, you have intern residency, and when you're doing that, and doing stuff like working 80 hours straight, kind of straight, et cetera. That's just how it works. And if you're an attorney, you're working hard hours and not having fun. So no one likes an apprenticeship. So that's what an apprenticeship is. So your first 5 years or first 5 years of working a law firm, of working as an attorney, you're learning the crap. You'll learn it, and it's fun. So it shouldn't be fun. Maybe you think it's fun, but it's not really fun. But the idea is that after apprenticeship, you become a partner or MD, whatever, a doctor with doctor. So, a doctor. And then that is different. Being a partner has certain matters, control income, associates work. So these are just different jobs. It's basically like a soldier versus a general. So you want to it's much more fun being a soldier compared to a general. You don't leave your career as a doctor because it's unpleasant being a resident. You don't stop being a doctor. So you you stick through it. So it's the same thing with if you're trying to become a partner in a law firm or whatever. You don't leave because it's unpleasant while you're an associate. If you can see light at the end of the tunnel, then again, if you're never going to see it, if you just don't like the tediousness of the work, if you don't like having to go to an office every day, or you don't like the idea of the clients and the work and it doesn't appeal to you, then you should stop practicing law in a law firm. Hell yeah. Why make yourself unhappy and stay unhappy, especially if you're doing it for other people? Like sometimes people are doing it for ego reasons. Like I don't want to look bad in front of others. Sometimes people are doing it because they're competitive. Some people have all sorts of reasons for staying in law firms when they aren't happy there, where they can never see themselves advancing, or they're just don't like it or whatever. It doesn't make any sense. You should get the hell out of there as soon as you can. And most of the time when attorneys leave law firms and don't like it, they will tell you instantly that they're much happier and they don't resent, they don't regret the choice. And most of the time they don't try to go back to law firms. So they want to stay exactly where they're at. So those are just things to consider when you're trying to do that. So during the interviews, how do I effectively communicate my reasons for transition to another practice area without seeming disloyal and manageable to different law firms? You can talk about all the things you don't like about a law firm. That would be one way. You can talk about the reasons that you don't like. So I talk about the reasons you don't like companies and you didn't understand, like companies. I did not understand that when you went in. Reasons you did not like, other practice acts. Understand when just talked about how you made a mistake. So, what are the reasons you could give? You could work not sophisticated, boring, demands, unstable, all these different things. You can just start listing the different reasons that you don't like it. Most of those reasons you can find in this webinar. And most of the times, if you are asked about that, then you can walk clients, practice skills not developing. There's all these reasons. That's how that works. Talking about all these reasons why a law firm is a better practice is really probably the most helpful. Okay, so let me answer this. It seems the information about the caliber of some in-house corporate training programs could be acquired via the in-person interviews simply asking a recruiter like you. Amazon, for example, seems to concentrate on recruiting candidates from firms. Finding this out took me 2 minutes of research. Their general counsel worked at Bogle and Gates and Wachtell. Why couldn't a law firm figure this out? Okay, actually, Amazon's very interesting right now. We saw a resume of someone the other day that went in-house at Amazon from a firm where he was making very little money, $100,000 a year, which isn't bad in a large city. It was not great. He got a job there paying something like $375,000 a year doing data privacy. And he wasn't even a data privacy attorney, but I think I don't know what's going on with him. Talking to my ex-wife about him, and she was her candidate. She's a recruiter in the firm. But so Amazon may have good training programs, they're always going to hire people from the best firms to work there. Of course, as a general counsel, that's what they'll do. But just because the general counsel is good doesn't mean that the attorneys are good. So the example I just gave you, an attorney hired for a $375,000 a year data privacy job, Medicare, if not below average qualifications, working there for years, that doesn't mean that the person's a good attorney just because they worked at Wachtell. So if you take, let's do another example here. Let me see here. If you take, two rations. So if you take, these are some of the largest companies you have, we're just going on here. What is the legal department like at Delta? Who knows? What is the legal department like at Wilson Sonsini? Very good. Wilson Sonsini is a good firm, but nobody knows anything about Delta Airlines. Hey, what's the legal department and the attorneys like at John Deere? I don't know, but I do know that the legal department at Simpson Thatcher is pretty freaking awesome. So this is how people think. What's the legal department like at HCA Healthcare? I have no idea. What's the legal department like at K&L Gates? It's great. It's great. So this is the way that law firms think. They know what the quality of attorneys are coming out of other big firms or other firms, but they had nothing about the legal departments at other companies. And just as I gave you this example of Amazon hiring somebody for $375,000 a year that was working at a $100,000 a year job doing insurance defense or something, You just don't know. So law firms can't figure it. The law firms can only figure out, and this is a very important point, the law firms can only figure out your skills and likely work quality by coming from their firm. Right? That's it. So they can only figure it out. Like they have no idea. Most legal departments, they have no idea. So what are they? And also when you're in a legal department working, it's not the same as working for a client, not the same. Yeah. So that they're not. So a law firm, if you're coming from Amazon, a law firm's not going to figure out that your skills are good because there's hundreds, if not over 1,000 people in the Amazon legal department. I might even be wrong. I might be come with that. I don't know. They're not going to think that it's a great legal department just because they hired someone from Wachtell or, but yeah, so just it's something to consider. No, law firms cannot figure it out based on the practice that the person's coming from. Okay, let's see here. This line. Okay, hi Harrison. I'm working as a clerk for a judge. I'm looking to make a jump to a law firm. Okay, so everyone knows what a clerk does, knows what a government clerk does for the most part. You don't need to, you do not need a lot of detail. It depends on the clerk, but if you're working for a clerk, people pretty much know what you do. You can write a few, just say some opinions, most of the judge, that sort of whatever. There's not, you don't need to go into a lot of detail because going into a lot of detail just makes it seem, and there's no reason to. And again, this is one of the biggest mistakes that everyone makes on their resume. And I hope you're not making this mistake, but I see this mistake in countless resumes that I review every single day. People list more details than they should. So if you're trying to apply for a litigation position, you don't list in your resume, like saying you got experience doing corporate work and stuff that has nothing to do with getting a litigation job. You just don't. You keep your experience limited to what you're trying to do. So resumes, by the way, don't have to have tons of experience. You don't need to list all the clubs you were in law school. You don't need to. You don't want to talk about your grades either. If you didn't get good grades, if you're like in the top 10% of your class or something, you can list that. But otherwise, there's no reason to list it. You don't want to list all this extraneous information in your resume. So a lot of resumes, by the way, just screw up, and they screw up because they list way too much detail. Or they list details that just collapse in on each other and are contradictory you don't need to. So clerk is, and by the way, anybody that doesn't get a position in a law firm at a law school, it's always a good idea to try to, if you want to be a litigator, to go to work for a judge for a year or two. But there are plenty of types of jobs that anyone can get. There's personal injury, insurance defense, criminal law, but everyone knows what a government clerk does. Now, you may want to go into criminal law. If you did, you might highlight some of the criminal work you did. If you want to go into litigation, you would basically talk about some of the litigation related stuff. But clerkships are great. I'll just give a few words about why clerkships are good. If you're thinking about them and you're a law student or whatever, clerkships are good. The reason that they're really good is because you're working for one person, that critique your work that you need to plead, and generally, most of the time, will fire you. Then also, the person will make you a better attorney, non-threatening environment, better, non-threat. So, meaning you're not competing with other associates and things to be looked the best. You're getting a few years of good training or a year or two of good training before you look in a law firm. So that can be very helpful. And then the only other point I wanted to make is when you have a clerkship, is it's much easier. It's much easier, but I made this in a point of the webinar, to get a job in a law firm if you worked in the summer, And then this is one final piece of, and I don't know how many, there's hundreds of people on this webinar, but I don't know how many people are on this webinar are associates versus law students versus attorneys. But if the law student wants to work in a law firm after graduation, they absolutely should work in a law firm during the summer. Absolutely. So no doubt about it. You need to. And I don't care. Harrison doesn't care if it's for free and you're working for free. You need to do it. And no one's telling you that. Probably most law schools don't tell you this, but I'm telling you this. I watch the market. I review hundreds of every week. I review 1,000 plus resumes, and I see what happens to people that don't work in law firms. Now, I'm not saying this happens to everyone, but you need to work in a law firm during the summer if you want to get a job in a law firm after the summer. You should do it whether or not it's free. You absolutely need to, because if you don't work in a law firm, if you do not work in a law firm, during the summer, it looks like you're not interested. That's it. So it looks like this is not something. That's it. So you have to work in a law firm. So you do whatever you can, and it's extremely important to do that in the summer to get a job. That doesn't mean you'll never get a job, but if you want to have a good odds of it, it's very important. Okay, so if you're in-house, what are appropriate things you can say or do that shows you're interested in moving to the client in a law? What are the appropriate things you can say or do that shows you are going to client? The most important would just be that you would like to work for them. So you can bring that up. You can give them the idea. And how do you meet someone or the opposite sex, or the same sex, someone that you're interested in romantically? You don't always come out and say you give them the idea. So how do you do that? You could do it subtly. You could, I don't know, but you give them the idea. You could approach them and just say, I read the opportunity, I'd love to work with you, and just jokingly, but then that's something they're interested in. They will take that seriously, and they'll say, yeah, I might think about that. This is a very good point. So the question really is, if I'm doing work for a client, for the law firm of my client, and I want to go work for that law firm, what can I do? I want to go work for that client. What can I do to get a job with that client? Clients, by the way, love hiring attorneys from working for them from law firms. So from law firms, they would be crazy not to. They can save hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and maybe even over $1 million a year. It's $1 million a year on legal fees, right? Because they can pay you whatever, and what else can they do? They can, you understand their matters. Understand their matters already. They like you, whatever. A lot of clients love hiring people from their law firms. It's just something that helps them. And actually, when you go to work for a client, if you're in a law firm, law firms actually love it. Law firms love it when their attorneys go to work for clients. The reason that law firms like it is because then they have an advocate inside of the law firm, inside of the company, meaning you will refer them work. When they find out they're going to work inside of a client, they're often very nice to you and want to make you happy, and will say nice things to you when you're leaving and be your friends. Okay. Let's see. And these are great questions, by the way. Thank you, everyone who's asking them. And if you have any more, anybody that's thinking of them, appreciate you asking. These are very good questions and things that I think will help a lot of people. Okay. If you're on a law firm for 6 months and they lay you off due to the pandemic, should you explain the interviews and try to move on and focus on the next opportunity? Yeah. So if you're at a law firm for 6 months and got laid off due to the pandemic, you can bring that up. That's fine. One thing I want to say, though, that's very important. So pandemic, of course, was years ago. When you're looking for a job, and this is very important for everyone to understand, and so here's the idea. So you are unemployed. Okay. So you're unemployed and you're unemployed on day one, unemployed. And this is, again, very important information. It's just, if you've been here for the past couple hours, this is worth every bit of time you've spent watching this webinar, because this could change the direction of your life and career. When you're looking for a job, you are your own client. What does that mean? That means you're representing yourself. So that's the most important part. So you're representing yourself. And the results you get and the speed in which you get them will determine the type of attorney you are. So that's it. So I want everyone to understand this, because this is just some hard-hitting information that I'm just giving to you directly that you need to understand. If you are sitting around 60 unemployed, you better think about what kind of attorney you are, or 60 or whatever, because the job of a good attorney, and again, I'm not trying to be rude here. And again, you don't have to, people said a lot of harsh things to me, even as recently as yesterday. and I listen to it and try to improve. But the results you got, this is not good, right? So it's not good because if you're your own, I'm just saying you're your own client, and would you want to be represented by you if you were, I don't know, represented by you? So this is what you're up against. So you're your own client and you're not getting these results. So the job of a client, the job of an attorney is to find solutions, right? To find solutions. So this means not going after everything, every solution, overturning every stone, speaking to whoever. If you've ever watched these movies about attorneys and their struggles and getting a good result and staying up all night and working on things and networking with people, and this is like the most common attorney movie there is. If you are unemployed, you are being tested as an attorney to find the right solutions. That's it. So that's your job. Your job is to find a position. Would you want to be represented by you if you were an attorney? Would you fight? Would you consider you the kind of person that you want to represent? All these are very important questions because when you're unemployed, you're basically your own attorney. So this is the most important thing for an attorney to understand. Anytime you're up against anything that's going on, you're expected as your own attorney to get good results. And if you've been unemployed since COVID or the pandemic, then you need to really figure this out. There was I remember, I don't know what it was very interesting. It was, I don't know, after the first George Bush lost, and this is, again, we're talking about, I don't know how long ago it was, 25 years ago, 30 years. It was over 30 years ago. But there was this famous guy named Michael Medved that was a critic. He was a critic, like a movie critic, and very smart guy. Went to Yale Law School. And he was talking, I was in a small room and a couple other people, and he was talking about this election. And he said, the only reason, because George Bush had won this war, done all this stuff, and said, he lost. And he said, the only reason that this person lost, that George Bush lost, was the most psychologically obvious reason that he wanted to. He just wasn't putting anything into the re-election campaign like he should have. And so it's like that with you. If you're not getting a job, if someone's not getting a job, the most obvious reason, I think, is that you don't want to. There's no one, for whatever reason, you don't want to do it. And that's fine. If you don't want to do it, do something else. But that to me is also the same thing. So this person is, so you need to really want it, and you need to be hungry for wanting to get these jobs and psych yourself up. I'm not sure what this thing is, but if you get fired, laid off, should you not go back and work? I'm guessing maybe for a law firm or something. Let me tell you something so you just understand it. I don't know where I read this statistic, but almost every attorney gets fired at some. So there's nothing, if you're practicing in multiple times. So there's nothing wrong with fired, honestly, multiple times, unless it's something really bad, but multiple times. So don't worry about it. Get back up and fix it. And that's it. Fix it and become a better attorney. So you can, attorney, don't make the same mistakes again. That's it. Hopefully the firm that fires you will give you some time to find a job. But other than that, if you get fired, most attorneys do. Most attorneys will get fired multiple times. It's just, at least that's what I've seen. Sometimes they'll be like, tell them, oh, the work's slow, can you look for a job, or you've got 6 months, or you're not partners, so you should start looking for something. These are light fires. Sometimes they're hard fires where they're asked to leave right away. But I would honestly not worry about ever getting fired and not applying to places again. You can come up with all sorts of reasons that you were fired that don't make it look like it's your fault. The firm ran out of work. The biggest partner there left. I was in a branch office and whatever. There's all sorts of reasons that you can come up for losing the job. Okay, luck. Yeah. It sounds like it's better to stay in a hostile work environment for many years to stay hireable. This seems fundamentally broken. We basically say, if you want to be treated with respect, sure, your firm, don't waste your time trying to get a job at law firm. Law firms will do the worst employer practice they can. Is there any way to hope for a positive work environment? No, I don't think you should stay up in a hostile work environment. There are law firms that are just horrible places to work. As a matter of fact, I would say more percent, and maybe even 20 in some cases, are horrible places to work. So you do not have to stay in a hostile work environment. As a matter of fact, you should leave as quickly as you can, because it's not good for your psychological health. It's not nothing good's going to happen to you. They could be very bad to you. You're feeling badly about yourself all the time. So no, hell no. You get out of a hostile work environment as freaking fast as you can. That's like the dumbest thing in the world for someone to say that. So I may have sounded like I said that, and I appreciate you pointing that out, but no, I don't believe that's true. And yes, there are positive work environments for trainees. There are law firms that limit your hours. There are law firms that have very good managers in them. There are law firms that do a lot of things to treat their attorneys very well, where people are happy. There are law firms that, most times, I've given this example before, there are small to mid-sized firms often that have where people have a lot of stability, where attorneys that are stable, attorneys have stability and stay. But lots of places there are places that are very nice. So you always often find those places. One thing that I recommend to people that I work with at BCG is you should be I'm not selling a service here. I'm not trying to get business because this is just about answering questions. I have a lot of people that I'm like, you should always be looking for a job. Just if you can always find a better place to work, you may always be happier somewhere else. You should go out on interviews when you can to learn about firms. You should always be looking for a job. That's what professional athletes do. That's what movie stars and people in the entertainment industry do. They're always looking for new opportunities. Now, most of the jobs that they do given are short-term type jobs, but they might do a film or television series or something. But you should always try to be basically looking for something. And especially if you're in a hostile work environment, that means getting on Law Crossing, which is a good source of jobs. And our site shows all the jobs basically that might be behind a paywall on a lot of sites, but that's a good source. Indeed, LinkedIn, just always be looking for positions. It's very helpful, important to be always trying to find something. And that's what I do with candidates at BCG. But a lot of times, no, I don't want to look. Partners and law firms, a lot of times are always looking. There's so many reasons that you should always be looking at jobs. Okay, great webinar. We're going to say, we'll have a weird case. I graduated from law school, started with a solo practitioner, then COVID hit, which impacted the business. I haven't been able to get back to law from like to. What do you suggest for someone who had COVID impact their career trajectory position as a valuable and desired candidate for law? Okay, again, all you need to do is law firms in Muskegon. I'll say you probably know larger markets. So let's go Columbus, Ohio. Just give me a random practice area. There will be a random practice, solo practitioner. Trust in the States. It's you just wherever you are in the country, there's going to be lots of firms, right, in your practice area. So all you need to do is to find those firms is just to continually look for them. There's going to be a ridiculous number, but you can always find a job. So I don't think that anything is impacting your trajectory. All you need to do is start contacting firms. If they don't have to have openings, you can just contact firms in whatever market you're in and look for a job. That's it. So there's so many positions out there. There's nothing to really worry about, and firms that'll hire you. So especially if you're working for a solo doing personal injury or something like that, it shouldn't be too difficult to do or to find something. Okay. So here's a good question. Let me see. Here's continuing. Okay. This question is, I'm an older lawyer who has been a partner in several good mid-sized firms and have been on my own with my own firm. Wow. Up to 16 lawyers for several decades. Now I'm older. I'd like to go to a firm that's important to bring in new clients. No business currently, as I was always a rainmaker of counsels. I don't want to rebuild my own firm. Have many accolades, such as Marquis Who's Who, the author of leading intellectual property treaties from Thomson Reuters, one of the largest trademark jury. What would you advise me? And I'd like to use a recruiter rather than go to my contact in the legal field. Okay, so that's interesting. So I think for a lot of people, there's two stages. So you go through two stages of your career. So one is hustle and bustle, and then the other is teaching. Sometimes teaching. The problem with your situation is just that when, again, listen to the stage you are, I would try to put myself in a position where I was teaching others. A recruiter, the problem with using a recruiter is, when an attorney gets senior, the only thing that the law firms really care about is if the person has business. That's not always the case. There's some practice areas, ERISA, where the firm have a certain amount of stuff that needs to be done. They don't really care, but you pretty much need to be in a position where you're having business. If you want to move or get into a law firm, especially if you're older, you need to be able to do that. So that's what the law firms are going to be concerned about. Now, if you have the ability to do like trademark related work and you want a verdict, you can sometimes find smaller firms that would want to have your name and have your name and background as part of their list of people and so forth working there, because it makes them look good and helps them attract business, which is where I think this is probably going for you. And then those law firms, you would have law firms that will allow you to put your credentials on will put credentials on their website. And then as part of that, may give you work, but we'll give you the opportunity. We'll give you the opportunity to take a percentage of the business you bring in. That's pretty much how this always works. The work business. So this is what I typically see happen most of the time for people that are very senior and when I say very senior, it could be 45 for all that, but that don't have any business and are older. This is how it works. And the problem with someone that's very senior like you is that your billing rate is going to be very high wherever you go. That billing rate is, if it's a smaller to mid-sized firm, the partners there are going to want to do the work and the clients will expect you to do the work rather than you. This situation, by the way, is as common as sunshine in California or Florida. This is what happens with a lot of senior attorneys. And sometimes you can find a large law firm. There are large law firms that also allow this. Having more people on their website, having people with good backgrounds looks very impressive to clients. But when push comes to shove, most of them are going to expect you to be doing a lot of the work there and to bring in your own clients in order to do things. I know that may sound disappointing, but that's how it works. Actually, at least that's what I've seen. And then you see an IP litigator with lots of trials. Yeah, so all of this is important, but at the same time, what law firms are looking for senior attorneys is having the work, bringing in the work to do. That's their main concern. I wanted to bring up one other point that I think is interesting that you might want to be aware of is a lot of law firms now still have mandatory retirement ages, which are often like 65. And this is not a lot, maybe it's not all large firms, but a lot of them do. But you would want to probably try to like small and medium firms. I can see the other thing that could work. And I'm sorry to give so many examples, but this is an important question. A lot of people have it. Another thing that can often work is if you can find a young attorney or a group of them that need someone like you, then that could work out. I've seen that work out. But that is really the gist of it. The most important thing is having the work when you get senior. Now, this same thing I'm telling you would apply even if you were like a 10-year attorney. I would say you want to try to go out and get work. Now you can get a job potentially, but they would be more interested in someone that currently has business. It's just how it works. The way I typically see people do it is they find a law firm that wants to put their bio and things on their website, and then they're willing to pay that law, or the law firm is willing to pay them a percentage of the work they bring in. Very common. That's what tends to happen most of the time, and how it works. Okay. If you want to answer a follow-up question, I'll answer it, but that to me is the most common way this works. Any insider trading from accounting firms to law firms. Okay. So that's the same thing. It's of supply and demand, of supply and demand. What I used to think, tell you it's changed, that more tax, et cetera, and jobs. Why is that? Most tax attorneys inside of law firms serve corporate department, serve corporate attorneys, or sometimes real estate attorneys, M&A, et cetera, or real estate. So most that's what a lot of what tax attorney would do in a large law firm. And so it's just a lot of demand. There's not a ton of work. So there's that. So law, supply and demand. Now the other thing that's going on with an accounting firm attorney is that I used to think, again, this is going back 20 plus years. I used to think it was impossible for an attorney to transition from accounting firm to before a law firm. I used to think it can't happen. Like, how is this possible? But because I never saw it happen. The fact is, though, it does happen, and it is possible. Many times, of course, they want an LLM from a school, which is often you're going to have from a certain extent. Yeah, why you good? I'm going to Georgetown or so in tax, and then, but then the practice areas. There's the branches of tax law that seem to get the most traction are international tax. Sometimes people in accounting firms will do that's marketable. You'll have different types of tax. Sometimes you'll even have, there's people with LLMs that do tax controversies. You don't need an LLM to do controversy. There's, what else? Some of these different types of tax will often get interviews if there's the work. But the biggest problem I think that there is with tax attorneys is when you look at most large law firms, they just don't have a ton of tax work. And there's very good tax departments, like at Fried Frank's got a good one. There's a bunch of them, but it's very hard for most tax attorneys to get jobs with law firms. Now, if I was a tax attorney, I would, in a big four accounting firm, I would probably try to, if I was in Los Angeles, for example, I would try to get jobs in other markets. I would look at law firms that have tax departments, and then I would probably send them unsolicited resumes to people that were actually working as partners in the tax department I was sending to. And that's what I would do. There are, by the way, a lot of jobs for tax attorneys if you look in the right place, but it's very hard for people to transition from an accounting firm to a law firm. And there's just a bunch of reasons for that. There's stuff that is, I could go on and on, but it's generally a law firm is different than an accounting firm. So the experience you get there from a law. So that's the main thing to keep in mind. This law firm is different from a law firm is different. So they do different types of work. But I used to not ever see people from accounting firms get jobs in law firms. Now we're representing people in our company from accounting firms and seeing them get jobs, but they tend to be things like if there's an international tax opening and a law firm has an opening for international tax attorney or something like that. But law firms almost always, a lot of times they will say, which I'm sure you realize on their job listing, they're looking for someone from a law firm. So they want someone from a law firm, not from an accounting firm. And there are a lot of times they're pretty straightforward about that. They want to make sure that the person's coming from there. And it's for all the reasons that I brought up today in terms of what's expected, how the work works, and the choices you may have made. I personally love tax law, so I think it's a shame that there's not more. This is the one practice area, for example, when I was doing it, I understood it almost instinctively. And I don't know, I just loved it. Whereas other practice areas, constitutional law and contracts, were asleep. But it's a good question. And I would send unsolicited resumes to people. That's basically what I've been doing. Then if you have a specialty, try to make it more specialized. Here's a question. Would you consider Miami a small market for patent attorneys? Is it easier to compete with tax firms here? Yeah, I think Miami, if you're a patent attorney, isn't a bad market to go into. I think there's demand. I think there's not a lot of firms doing that work there. One thing I wanted to bring up about patent law, though, this is a good question, is patent law firms these days are, most patent law firms, most IP/patent law firms are virtual. What's that mean? That means that you might have a patent law firm of 25 people, and they'll be in Michigan, they'll be in Kentucky, they'll be in Florida, they'll be in California. So most patent law firms, are virtual. And because they're virtual, what that means is you can basically, when you work in this virtual law firm, you can be anywhere. So you can compete in terms of getting a job. They will pull people from all different states and places, because remember, this is for non-patent attorneys. The USPTO is all you need to practice. Still working in a patent law firm. So you don't necessarily need a state bar. I don't have a state bar works exactly when you need the state bar, but you don't, but the patent bar is really the most important. Yeah, Miami is a smaller market, that I would say for patent attorneys. But the only other thing I would say about in terms of getting a job as a patent lawyer is patents are also becoming commodities. Our patent work is becoming a commodity, meaning it's not necessarily based on the billable hours. So it's based on, a cost per patent. Due to that, a lot of times law firms will, it doesn't really matter where you work. Good. Lots of good questions. I appreciate it. See here. How Supreme Court operates a rural practice program where, if not enough stake in a portion of your law school, that would be forgiven if you commit 3 years of practice in rural communities, which are undervalued. Okay, that's great. That's a good learning experience. And I don't know how that's great. A great program. I don't see a problem with it. I think medical schools have similar problems. The only issue I would say is if you do that right away, if you do it right out of law school, the only issue that I can see happening is you may develop poor habits. So you really learn how to be an attorney. Quality of training. So the quality of training I can receive with an attorney will help you develop. What does that mean? That means that giant animal and giant law and law firm will have different standards than a rural law firm. You can understand it. So just different types of attorneys have different standards for the types of work that they want. So it's important, depending on where you want to work in the long run, it's important that you get good legal skills. And good legal skills means things like how deeply you think through a problem, how carefully you need to edit things, ways of doing things that you pick up when you work with other very smart people. It's just important to try to work often with the best communicator. Okay. If someone has become entrepreneurial since losing the job, should they advertise that to prospective employers? I understand it certainly seems bad, but what if entrepreneurs related to practice? Yeah. So if you have learned to bring in a certain type of client and do work for a certain type of client as an entrepreneur, then that's great. So there's nothing wrong. That's entrepreneurial related to something that could help the client. But again, the thing that the law firms are concerned about, they're concerned about these questions. So they're concerned about whether or not it can be managed and you'll stick around. So anybody that's entrepreneurial by their nature is going to find one opportunity and once they've satisfied their interest there, they'll move on to another. And a lot of times you don't know whether or not these people, it's very hard to manage them so it's very difficult to understand with these types of candidates to really know if they're going to be, if you're entrepreneurial, if you're going to stick around. So that's something that the law firm is concerned about. So if you were a law firm and some person came to you and you could tell that they had these ideas and really want to do other stuff, you probably wouldn't want to hire them because that's a big risk. It'd be difficult to manage and they wouldn't commit. So if you are entrepreneurial, the best way of approaching that would just be to try to say, I brought in all these clients in this practice area. I think with your platform, I could bring in more and help us grow and things like that. The only problem with entrepreneurs like that is that they start making demands, wanting money and wanting more and always being unhappy. And it becomes very difficult for the law firm to manage. Okay, let's see here. This is our last question. Let's see here. I started my career in litigation defense as a new associate. The bill hours burnt me out. Of course, after years of practice, I derailed and tried entrepreneurship in a non-related field of law. 2 years later, we're back to law. How do I address these 2 years of not trying to work on my resume? There's nothing wrong with that. You can, if you're a woman and you have a gap there, people will assume maybe you're doing something family related. But if you do say you wanted to do something not related to practice of law, you can put it on your resume. The problem with, it's very common, by the way, for attorneys to leave law firms. They'll know someone who's an entrepreneur and has a great opportunity, and they will leave the law firm to go do that entrepreneurial activity. Most attorneys, by the way, are not naturally entrepreneurial. So they are risk averse. Their job is to protect clients, and it's a different type of personality. The personality of a very good attorney is much different than the personality of an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs tend to ignore facts, take risks, like all these sorts of things, whereas attorneys tend to be very risk averse. So you are welcome to put that on your resume and then go back. Not every attorney is going to judge that negatively. Again, it's just a law of supply and demand. If you apply to go to, if you try to go to actually, there's one more question under this. If you try to, you have to send your resume to people that are going to be interested in it, regardless of what you've done with your career at all. So you need to be very careful. You need to be making sure that you're only applying to places that are going to ignore that because they need you. That could be smaller firms. It could be smaller firms in certain practice areas where it's not going to matter, all that kind of stuff. The sixth question is, don't think anyone from Chicago is trying to go to Omaha. What about that situation? What do you say about that situation where you only know big cities? Yeah, so if you only know big cities, then that's a very easy question. I gave Omaha just as an example. You don't think you can find anything, but there's suburbs of large cities. There's also large cities is one of the easiest things. There's also different practice areas where different practice areas relating to what you do, practice areas where there's, I don't really know how to explain that other than to say sometimes a litigator can become a personal injury attorney or insurance defense attorney. Sometimes someone interested in corporate could become an estate planning attorney. There's all sorts of ways to do it, but everything's about the law, supply and demand. So you want to make sure that you apply to firms that where there's more need for someone like you than there's not. And then the other thing I would say too is it's very common for things to happen. Sometimes an attorney will get fired or not get out of law school and get a job with a crappy little firm or that they consider a crappy little firm. Then they'll move, they'll do well there and they'll get a skill. They'll move to a bigger firm and then a bigger firm. So that happens to people all the time. So that's all you want to think about. You can always start a small firm and you can do a larger firm. It's very easy, but you need to do that in the market that you're in. Okay. So thanks everyone for all the questions and for being on the webinar this week. I know this is a lot of information to go through, but it did talk about things that are pretty important to staying employed in law firms and things you can do. And again, just this particular, I'm just looking through everything that we covered today. Very smart being on these webinars. I get emails and stuff almost every day for people that have applied a lot of this stuff, and it's really helped their career. You've learned today about intellectual property law, how to get into that. You've learned about how to find jobs based on the law of supply and demand and how to send yourself to smaller markets. You've learned about how law firms are viewing you if you come from smaller markets, if you come from in-house and other things. So you've learned about reason to stay in law firms if you don't like it, but then the reason to leave. And you've learned about what the difference between a legal department and a law firm is and why law firms don't look necessarily at in-house legal department. People from in-house legal departments, the same as law students. You learned about the importance of law students working in law firms during and before, after graduation or during law school as opposed to graduation. You learned about the advantage of clerkships and how you can learn, especially if you want to be a litigator. You've learned about how to go in-house and how you can ask about going in-house and the reasons to go in-house. You've learned about being your own lawyer if you're trying to look for a job and how the law firms look at you and judge you, how effective of a lawyer you are if you don't have a position. And that's why, you need to try as hard as you possibly can. Use all your skills when you're trying to get a job as an unemployed lawyer, as an employed lawyer. You've learned about getting out of hostile work environments. You've learned about when you're older, what you can do. You've learned about accounting firms, patent work standards, like how you work in a bigger firm may give you better work skills. You've learned about entrepreneurs. You've learned about supply and law and demand and a bunch of other stuff. So each of these points, by the way, are very smart to learn about this stuff because it can make you a better lawyer, a much better lawyer. And it can prevent you from making career mistakes. Most of the time attorneys don't know this stuff. And so now you do. And just very impressive that you would learn it because I can definitely just tend to see if there's anything else we missed, but a lot of important stuff today. So thank you for being on this webinar. I appreciate everyone taking the time and I will be back here next week.